We actually call her grandmother Ying, which is the Chinese word for grandmother on the father's side of the family.
I called him Grandpa Foot.
We, in our native language, in Hindi, we call them Dada and Dadi.
My other grandmother would be Maman Bozorg, which is Persian for grandmother.
Muchechu means old woman in Kinyarwanda.
I called her Safta, which is a Hebrew word for grandma.
Everybody called her Mamitita.
We called her Mima Dede.
Grandma.
Hi, I'm Steph.
And I'm Robin. Welcome to Stories from Grandparents,
the podcast where we share stories about and from grandparents.
So this season, we had asked for some listeners to email in some stories about their grandparents just to switch things up a bit and see if we could get more stories from around the world or just a different diversity or different type of story. And we did get a couple. So I am going to read one now from Michelle. And she called it, "A Story of My Grandpa, Being Thrifty Should Not Be Shamed." My grandfather was born in the year 1937 in a village in Henan Province, China, near Debi Mountains. He looks steadfast thin. I've never seen him changing in any ways except getting a few wrinkles on his face. And he is very sharp-eyed. He was a high school teacher teaching geometry, but to me, he was more like a scholar. He went to university, and not too many people went to university in their age. When he was born, his family ran their own business, and therefore his family was relatively wealthy compared to others in the same village. However, because of World War II, the world economy was affected, and he was living in an era of scarcity. His family led him to always be prudent, just like how elder people in China called being thrifty traditional Chinese virtues. Just like my grandpa said, his height was only 149 centimeters before he went to university, and the first year in university, because he had better food and the war was over, he grew more than 20 centimeters, reaching 172 centimeters. For my generation, especially my cousins and I, we laugh whenever we heard this during our childhood because we could never imagine how bad the conditions were during our grandpa's life. My parents were relatively busy when I was born. Thus, my grandparents were living with me until I moved to Canada at the age of 14. Therefore, I was raised by my grandparents. They took great care of me. They facilitated my life attitude of being not wasteful in either food or other supplies. Especially my grandpa. He was indeed an eco-warrior. I remember how he always taught me to use a piece of napkin twice and even to split one napkin into two pieces so that one piece of napkin can be used 4 times. He still does this today, even though he's not lacking in anything now. I always remember he was drinking congee, a type of rice soup, very quickly, and because he started to drink it in a circular motion along the bowl edge. Why not eating the soup? Because Chinese people literally drink soup, especially the elders. They didn't use a spoon for the small amount of liquid. They were not used to it. When he drank the soup in one direction, the rest of the hot congee remained in the middle of the bowl and became cool enough to drink. And in the second round, he was able to drink the middle of the soup without burning his mouth. With bowl number 2, he followed the same method, drinking the congee along the bowl's edge, and he was able to finish it faster. Because food became limited after World War II, he could only get the second bowl of congee after he finished the first bowl. As long as he finished it faster than the other students, he could get more congee to feed himself because only a limited amount of congee was provided. He carried that habit when he was in middle school and until now. Watching him eat soup was like observing a road race. He went very quickly. For us, everything comes so easily. Everything seems unlimited. We have unlimited tissue, napkins, as well as food, and we don't even think about it. For my grandpa and his peers, each paper towel, each tissue was desperately hard to get when they were young. Hence, to wipe the floor after wiping the desk using the same paper towel should not be something of note. I do that too. Being eco-friendly to me is the same as being thrifty, which I think is a great life attitude for all of Earth's people. No matter where you are from, we are all living on the same earth with the same limited natural resources and the same limited love provided by the Earth Mother. Nobody can predict the crusts and troughs in their life, so we should be thoughtful about everything we do, and we should encourage others. From my grandpa's story, I learned to be conservative, just like being thrifty. In other words, taking precautions against the changes of life. Hence, from my understanding, when the economy falls or other unpredictable things in life happen, we can still be survived. Just like how we save money for something bigger, we save resources for unpredictable futures. So Nabila wrote us a story about her grandmother, and so I'm going to read that now. Hi, Robin and Steph. I've taken the time to craft a story that best illustrates my Apu, who I live thousands of miles away from. I'm an international student in Toronto, and I've not been able to go back home thanks to the pandemic. However, my grandmother and I still converse over video calls, and I miss her so much. It is an honor to be able to speak about her. I am also attaching a photo of our video conversation for a little extra context. I hope you like it. We'll have to share that on our social media. My grandmother is from Bangladesh. She was born in a village named Munshiganj. How do you think it's said?
I think that's how
Munshiganj?
how I would say it. Munshiganj.
My relationship with my maternal grandmother was like a sister. I know this sounds strange, but that's what I call her, Apu. And that is how she treated me, like an older sibling who always wanted a younger sister. We lived in different countries. You would think that is unfortunate, but it made our time together that much more special, and we developed a deep gratitude for each other's presence, looked forward to seeing each other during that one time of the year until it was time to say goodbye, which was never easy, but always left us loving each other a whole lot more. She now extends those feelings and love toward my 7-year-old daughter. However, I know it's not the same, and I am still her favorite. That's how I say that.
Yeah.
My grandmother is the most beautiful woman, not only in her family, but also in her village. Most women in my family do not possess the gift of height, but my grandmother is tall. She has a slim figure and a bright complexion. During her days, and as culture allows, she had many suitors, but she was picky. She knew her worth and picked the best human I know till date, my grandfather. Ooh, so the grandmother wasn't the best human she knew. She is the oldest in her family, and therefore, I'd argue, a little spoiled. My great-grandmother, who is still alive, and yes, we have 5 generations of women in our family, amazing,
Wow.
still gives in to her whims, which is insane. She will cook this bratty grandmother, old great-grandmother.
Yeah, I love it.
Which is insane. She will cook my grandmother's favorite meals that she had requested over the phone and have it sent over to her house. Yes, my grandmother lives with us. My family believes, and I agree, it is a sense of security and a blessing to have our elders live with us. Now my Apu is old. She suffered from a stroke 10 years ago and has been bedridden ever since. However, with some assistance, she can try to walk as only one side of her body has some sensation left. My Apu is very particular and a perfectionist, a dangerous combination if you ask me. When we were younger, only my sister and I were allowed to sit on her bed. If anyone else would sit on it, she would wait right by it for them to move so she could smooth out the wrinkles. This annoyed both my parents and more of our relatives to their wits' end, where they avoided sitting on her bed altogether. She is notorious for that. She needs everything to her standard of perfection. As I mentioned, she has been paralyzed for over 10 years now. However, she was still able to walk with assistance, and it took a lot of physiotherapy to regain sensation in the other half. It did not work too well, but there was a point where she was able to walk using a walking tool. One day, my mother was administering her meds. She is diabetic and needs to be given insulin daily and had left the lights on to get something. My Apu, not being the most patient person ever, attempted to get up and turn the lights off herself. She hates bright lights because of her cataract operation. It interferes with the lens in her eyes. She had almost made it, but upon letting go of the tool to turn the switch off, she lost balance and fell and broke her leg. Oh no, very sad. Thankfully, my mother took immediate action and her leg was immediately taken care of. Surprisingly, the bones were able to heal because this is unusual for her age of 80 plus, but we were grateful she recovered and is no longer in pain. But that one story is something that we still bring up and laugh about at the dinner table, and her absolute lack of patience. With warmth, Nabila B.
What I love is that they clearly get a kick out of her, even though like she's got a lot of quirks. You know, like it's like her lack of patience, and she's very particular, but they just like they love her for it.
Yeah, and they totally indulge her needs and her whims.
Also, like, how old is her great grandmother? If her grandmother is like over 80. You guys got good genes, Nabila.
Yeah, we expect you to be a grandmother and live to be very old too, I suppose. That's great.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Cute.
Very cute. Okay, so this next story is a bit different in that it's actually a friend of mine, Jessie, who had posted on social media an obituary that he wrote for his grandmother. And I loved it so much that I got his permission to share it with you all. And I hope that one day I can get him on the podcast to tell some of these stories in person. But in the meantime, here's what he wrote about his grandmother. Sad to share the news, my grandmother Helen passed away last night. Fortunately, she left us peacefully in her sleep. She leaves behind 2 daughters, a son, as well as her 5 grandchildren and a legion of friends. My grandmother was a complicated woman who taught me a lot about the importance of injecting glamour into your life wherever you can. Whether it be a perm to jazz things up, blasting Bette Midler on a road trip, or dragging out the couch cushions to suntan in the yard with a drink and a smoke, never from the pack, always from her silver cigarette case. She grew up in Saskatchewan and Alberta, the daughter of Katrina and Hans, a Dutch whaler who somehow found himself in Canada. As a young woman, she left Calgary, flying across the Atlantic and sailing from London to South Africa to meet her fiancé's family and start her new life. After realizing it wasn't a good match, she called things off and chose to stay and live in South Africa on her own for some time, thoroughly scandalizing my great-grandmother. When she returned to Calgary, she met my grandfather, accidentally running him over at a snowmobile rally she was attending with her friend. They hit it off and went on to settle down in Alberta, starting a family and raising a small army of pets. Siamese cats were her absolute favorites. She went into insurance and had a successful career. I still vividly remember her getting into her full 80s glam and heading downtown for work in the, quote, big tower. My mom and I were fortunate enough to spend the first 5 years of my life living with them after my parents' divorce. I was her constant shadow, like most gay boys are with their grandmothers, whether it was in her closet fascinated with her giant shoulder pads and floral prints and the way her dresses swooshed, or pulling up my Ninja Turtle chair to sit by her and watch Wheel of Fortune while she knit something fabulous. When I focus, I can still see her painting her perfectly manicured nails and hear her strumming them against her coffee cup as she read the paper. Eventually, my grandparents retired to a small village in Alberta, where my grandfather could tinker in the old blacksmith shop on the property while she did her crosswords and relaxed on the porch. I will always remember how completely my grandfather loved her. Complicated as any couple is, you could never deny Dale loved Helen and would give her the moon if she asked. After his passing, we realized she was in the early stages of Alzheimer's dementia and began the tough journey many families face of having to figure out a new normal. Fortunately, we were able to find care for her in Airdrie, keeping her close to family. I went off to university and made a habit of calling her on Thursdays to get the lowdown on how her bingo hustling was going. I'm so grateful for those conversations. I'd like to thank the folks at Bethany for taking care of my grandmother and being there for her as a strong support. Elder care is so important, and we truly need to take the profit out of the industry and ensure a more robust public system is available for all seniors should they need it. As we process this great loss, I'd love if you could raise a glass to her and take some time out of your day this week to do something small and glamorous no matter where you are. Find a comfy spot and luxuriate in the moment like she would. She will be sorely missed. Thank you, Jessie, and thank you, Nabila and Michelle, for sharing your stories. We'd love to do more of these. If you have a story that you would like to share, please write to us. Whether you want to be interviewed on the podcast or even just submit a story like this that we can read out, just email us at storiesfromgrandparentspodcast@gmail.com. Thank you for listening to Stories from Grandparents. If you have any interest in submitting stories or if you want to participate on the podcast, please send us an email at storiesfromgrandparentspodcast@gmail.com.
And don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen. It really helps us out.